Hello, and welcome to episode 2.9, the Winter Break edition of Notes from the Aisle Seat, the podcast that covers the arts in northern Chautauqua County, sponsored by the 1891 Fredonia Opera House. My name is Tom Laughlin, and I'm your host as we bring you news and information about arts events at the Opera House and around the region, including interviews with artists and creators across the county. Well, I don't know about you, but after this November 2.0 event and the Christmas of 22 blizzard event, I am certainly glad to get a break from all that heavy winter weather since the new year began. It's nice to catch a break from all that snow, even if the weather is that typical dull, dreary, cloudy, sunless, chilly type of day so typical of the region. At least the temperatures are above freezing, and the current lack of snow makes it easy to get out and take a walk without much trouble. While area schools are back in session, the college is still on break, and while the Opera House staff is back in business, there's not that much going on in January besides the Live at the Met presentation of Fedora and the cinema series. So we'll cover those two events, as well as get a preview of the faculty exhibit at the Marion Art Gallery coming up later in the month. A nice light show just to ease us back from break. First up, a discussion with Dr. Robert Strauss about the upcoming Live at the Met presentation of Umberto Giordano's opera Fedora on Saturday, January 14, 2023, beginning at 1 p.m. Dr. Strauss gives us a little insight into his own personal attachment to one of the opera's signature arias. Joining me now to talk about the Live at the Met production of Fedora is Dr. Robert Strauss. He is on the voice faculty at SUNY Fredonia. He is also the producer of the Hillman Opera. And we've talked many times, and I don't keep count, but Rob's a frequent guest. So it's always great to have him. Hi, Rob.
Thanks. I'm thrilled to be back.
Yeah, great. Okay, so let's get right into this discussion of Fedora. It's not really an opera that's done a lot. It seems to be a much more obscure one, but neither is it, something that is completely obscure. The Met has done it a couple of times, and it does have a history. So why don't we start off by talking about a little bit about the plot and the background of the opera?
Yeah, well, I'll start by saying, there are some arias from it, including the tenor aria Amor, vieta, which have been famous throughout. I mean, many tenors like Caruso and Domingo have concertized with that aria, and so there. But the story itself is kind of standard opera fare. And I was thinking about it, knowing about this interview coming up, and I didn't want to just put it in opera's lap and make it sound outdated or uninteresting. I feel like it's a sort of plot that you can find in Real Housewives of whomever. So the public is still interested in these sort of larger than life, the new man I'm interested in killed my husband, and it was a political issue, but it turns out, spoiler everyone, stop listening if you don't want to know the end. But it turns out that he killed my husband because he caught him sleeping with his wife.
Right.
And so it was a crime of passion rather than crime of politics. But by the end, many people are dead. And since my lot in life is often to be the secondary tenor role, I like to say that in Tosca 2, my character is the lead. So by the end of Fedora, I could be the lead of Fedora 2.
Okay. Yeah. It's an interesting little piece in that regard because I think that the composer Umberto Giordano was actually, interestingly enough, one of the sort of leading lights of the movement known as Verismo opera.
Mhm.
But yet this particular one that he did is not really classified that way.
No, it wouldn't be. Yeah, the Verismo is supposed to be sort of like ordinary life, ordinary people, very real but dramatic situations. And yes, this is about royalty and politics, although there's a little bit not to bring current day politics into it, but there's a certain amount of drama in that as well. But yes, sorry, back to it's not really what we would characterize musically, probably, but not dramatically as Verismo.
Yeah, and let's just touch on that just for a little bit because I listened to, at least some of the opera. I was listening to it earlier this week, and there's not Verismo is usually sort of contrasted with the bel canto style, and there's not really, when you listen to it, that kind of high-flying lyrical touch to it. It tends to be a little bit more. I really wouldn't know how to characterize it, but it seems to be. It feels shorter and more compact and a little more less romanticized in terms of how the music flows out, both from the orchestra and from the singers.
Yeah, yeah. It's always interesting to look back on this, but I suspect that the Verismo composers were really saying that they wanted to focus more on the drama in bel canto, beautiful singing. You know, Sometimes for the arias or for large chunks of time, it felt like the plot stopped.
Hmm.
The story stopped being told in a way, while the singer just showed what they can do.
Right.
Now, I'm not saying that that's true of bel canto, but I think that's people who don't like it would say that for sure. But I suspect that the new generation of composers, these long lyrical or florid passages of coloratura didn't seem to them to further the plot, and also bigger orchestras. So they made the orchestras bigger and the melodies less. I don't want to say less hummable, but in ways it's less about that and more about furthering the drama as they saw.
Yeah, that seems to be the case. When I was looking at it, I know that Fedora happens to be one of the shortest operas that I know. It comes in at less than 2 hours, I believe. So,
Awesome.
yeah, that's saying something just to begin with. I mean, that's really kind of but I was, when I was listening to the first act of it, it just seems to. It really the lyrics and the music, everything seems to really push the action forward. There's only I can only think of one aria. I think the opening aria by the soprano that comes in. Fedora herself is
Mhm.
uh, you know a little bit kind of set apart from the rest of the act, but the rest of it just sort of flows along and tells the
Right.
story very quickly, I thought.
Yeah, more conversational in a way.
Yeah, yeah, much more conversational. Now this production happens to have a couple of singers that I think have certainly some reputation. But this one we have Sonya Yoncheva. She's a
Uh,
Bulgarian soprano, and also the tenor, the guy who's playing Count Loris, the love interest. Her love interest is Piotr Beczala, I believe it's pronounced. It's a Polish name, so I'm having a little trouble getting it the exact. Can you tell us about these two singers?
what I know of them is that they're just really, at my age, I want to say up and coming, but they've been on the scene for a little while, doing things, but just really big and gorgeous voices.
Yeah, so Sonia, I think she's I don't quite know. I think opera singers sort of kind of hit their stride in their late 30s, 40s,
Yeah,
around that period of time, and she seems to be coming into her own. She's done, she became famous for Mimi from La Boheme and a couple of
right.
other things, and now she's starting to pick up, and she's done a number of other shows at the Met. And I think the same thing is true for Piotr. He's also someone who is up and coming. He's also done La Boheme, but
Yeah,
with Netrebko, I believe, playing Mimi. He's done opposite her.
right.
So they're both really, really very good singers. Do their voices need to be as big in this kind of an opera as they do in something like Bohème?
Yes. Yes, and maybe even more so a little bit, for sure. Well, and again, I'm basing this a little bit on the aria that I know that's too big for me, but it's just the orchestrations are thick, the tessitura is demanding and not always high, but you have to make a lot of noise in the middle of your range. It's true for a bohème to an extent.
Hmm.
I think bohème sees us moving into that direction,
Hmm.
whereas Fedora is there in
Is
that.
already there. Yeah, well, it's kind of interesting because I don't know, Bohem, when you look at Bohem and you put it against Fedora, some people will classify like Bohem as Verismo, some will classify it as bel canto, but and the same thing is true for this one.
Right.
Is Fedora Verismo, is Fedora bel canto? I don't really know, but
Well, it's not like there was, an alarm went off and someone said, "Okay, everybody, put your pencils down. Bel canto is over. The next section we're starting is Verismo." So
the line is never that hard. It's never that hard.
no, no, not at all. So that operas written in the 1970s will harken back to bel canto or whatnot, just because that's what the composer feels that the drama or the words or just the music they want to write.
Now tell me a little bit more. You're in love with that aria in the second act from the tenor. What is it about it that has always attracted you? I mean, you
Oh,
told me before you told me before we
I
started speaking.
did.
That
I
you've known it since you were 19. So,
I well, with singers, it's always the grass is always greener, isn't it?
yes.
There's Mimi's Farewell from Bohème that I want to sing. Someday I'll sing it
Uh-huh.
in a performance. But and all of my soprano friends who want to sing Una furtiva, the tenor aria from l'Elysire. So in this case, it's even worse because it is a tenor role, but it's just not my voice type
Uh-huh.
as far as that goes. But it's his profession of love to um, to the soprano. Um, and it's gorgeous and lyrical and big in all the ways that and passionate in all the ways that you'd expect opera to be. So I think that's what draws me to it, although it's also that jealousy. So I'll admit, I'll own up to that.
Well, that's that I've always wanted to play Hamlet, but then again, Thornton Wilder said they all want to play Hamlet, so
Really, I think, yeah, that's what it is. It's
that's what it is.
Meanwhile, there's always someone who wants to play the roles that we can. So
That's right. That's right. Yeah. Uh-huh. So and I think that, by the way, I think that section really ends with I read a couple of times where both Placido Domingo, I think, and I think Jose Carreras also sang that, but
mhm.
the kiss at the end of that opera is supposed to be like a huge, big dramatic moment, and it really knocks people's socks off when they see it.
Oh, no doubt.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that really culminates the whole thing. I know that there's an interesting trend going on at the Met. I'm not sure Fedora is part of this, but it seems that the Met is now beginning to trend away from the sort of the standard classical fare that they've been having for years and years. And they had an incident over the holiday season where their box office was hacked into and they couldn't sell tickets for a long time. And when they came out of that and finally resolved that, they really began to talk about the fact that they were going to go in like a more modern direction. And do you see? And I've also noticed in doing these interviews with you and Julie Newell and Dan Eos that they are more modern. We're not talking about that. We're talking about things like, fire shut up in my bones and the
Yep.
hours and so on and so forth. Do you see that trend continuing?
Well, I think I do. There's the really skeptical part. Well, it's not skeptical, but the practical part of me that it's selling. It's selling really well. These new operas are selling very, very well. So of
Mhm.
course they're going to keep producing them and looking for um, other new stories. I think that's great for contemporary composers to write this stuff. But I think in a way it's a perfect storm because Fire Shut Up in My Bones it's a contemporary story. It's Charles M. Blow.
Mhm.
And so The Hours is also contemporary-ish.
Mhm.
Um, uh, One of the characters, secondary characters, dying of AIDS.
Mhm.
So, audiences can see themselves perhaps better in these stories, insert themselves into it, which is, I think, part of why I enjoy theater is being able to identify with the people on the stage. And I felt that way. um, before, and the ownership. I think there's the other practical or skeptical part that, it could be donors are interested in seeing this sort of thing and being a part of. If there isn't money to produce opera, there isn't opera, of course, and so
Mhm.
it could be that the Met has done a really, really great job of fostering relationships with people who want to be a part of not the 20,000th production of Rigoletto, which I hope they keep doing, but in the first production of the hours.
Right. Right. And there's also, I think that there's this consistent, I see it in theater too, and I guess it's probably running in opera to, diversity, inclusion, trying to get
Yes.
stuff onto the major stage of the United States that really has those elements in it.
Yeah, inclusive and representative and so on and so forth. And I think, you know, I I'm tired of looking for silver linings in the pandemic because there weren't any ever. But we did have the chance to sort of sit and think about when we as we're coming out of this, what do we really want to do? Do we need to keep doing the same things the same way that we've done for a century, or can we add new things, do things in new ways? So
Right. Yeah,
it's interesting.
and I actually think that some of the ones I know that Champion is coming up also later on in the season for Live at the Met. So we're going to get a more of a dose of these kinds of things, but we also get the standards like Rosencavalier and stuff like
Yeah.
that as
Oh
well.
yeah,
So
yeah.
so it's a good mix. Well, Rob, listen, thank you for coming on, and I know that I'm going to be talking to you later in May because you are among the many hats you wear. You're also the artistic director of the Buffalo Gay Men's Chorus, and I
Yeah.
understand you've booked the Opera House for May. Yes?
Yeah, I'm thrilled. I'm thrilled that the Buffalo Gay Men's Chorus will be at the Opera House on May 13th, a Saturday. I think it's 7:30 p.m. Doing a concert Stronger Than Silence, and it's exciting to show off the Opera House to the chorus, and hopefully show the chorus off to people in the area.
Now I'm gonna you got to give me a teaser. Just give me one thing you have planned on the program, just one, because I have to.
Oh, now you have to. I love all my children equally. So we will be that night will be the first performance of a piece called "Warmth Is My Home,"
Uh-huh.
which was written for us by Fredonia alum Mickey Wadsworth, who graduated 3 or 4 years ago from the composition area.
Hmm.
So they wrote this piece for us using words um, by the chorus and by other Buffalo area LGBTQ plus individuals. We sent out a survey, they answered it, and so it's our word. So I'm excited about that.
Okay, well, we have to stop right there. Otherwise, I will have nothing to interview you about when I get you back in May. So,
Exactly.
so we want to hold off on the rest of it. But always that little sneak peek to entice people to come back and listen to the next
Perfect.
interview. That'd be great. Rob,
While they're at Fedora during the intermission, they'll have something to think about.
that's right. There you go. Wonderful, Rob. As always, such an entertaining time to talk to you. I really appreciate your time, especially during vacation. And we'll for sure be seeing you and listening to you again in May when you bring the Gay Men's Chorus down here.
Awesome. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Rob. Take care.
My pleasure. You too.
Fedora by Umberto Giordano will be screened on Saturday, January 14th, 2023 at 1 p.m. Tickets are $20 for the general public, $18 for Opera House members, and $10 for students. You can get tickets by calling the box office at 716-679-1891 or online at www.fredopera.org. Live at the Met is underwritten with support from Daniel S. Kaufman and Timothy W. Beaver. The faculty exhibit at the Kathy and Jesse Marion Art Gallery is a biannual event where the faculty of the Department of Visual Arts and New Media at SUNY Fredonia exhibit some of their latest work. It's always a wonderful and varied look into the talents of the faculty and their various media, and I spoke with Mr. Peter Tucker, Associate Professor of Sculpture, to get his take on the exhibit, as well as to find out what he's working on for the exhibit himself. Joining me now is Associate Professor of Sculpture over at SUNY Fredonia, Department of Visual Arts and New Media, Mr. Peter Tucker. Peter, how are you?
I'm good, Tom. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you, too. It's always good to start 2023 off, and hopefully you and I will become better people as the year goes on, right?
That's the goal. That's the
goal. So let's start off with the whole concept of the faculty art exhibit. I usually they do that like every other year. They start off the spring semester. Is that right? And what?
Every other year.
And the department has made a commitment to that. Yes. What's the purpose?
Yeah. Well, I'd say. I think the primary purpose, as it should be for the gallery, is at an educational institution is to provide opportunities for our students to see a variety of forms of artwork and ways of working. And a lot of us, myself included, I almost never show my work to my students. So I think it's great for them to see what we do, so that they can sort of get an understanding of, where we're coming from and how we approach stuff. So I think the primary purpose, though, really is as an educational tool for our students. So
yeah, okay, that's always a good thing. Well, you're an artist in your own right, obviously. You're a sculptor, and you've been working in the department. How many years now?
I think this is going on 14.
Going on 14 years, right? Yeah. And obviously you've developed an aesthetic. So talk to me about a little bit about your artwork, your own journey through your process, how you got to be where you think you are, and then we'll talk about a few maybe of the pieces that you're going to exhibit.
Sure. Yeah, it's actually really interesting to me, Tom, because I recently made, at least mentally, kind of a big shift in my work, and I think that's to me it's also really evident in this exhibition, because I'm showing a piece I made in 2020, and then I'm showing pieces I'm still in the process of sanding as we're speaking, as Tom can see me working on these little jewels I'm making out of wood. But and so for me, I'm right in the middle of this big shift, which is kind of exciting, because I'm shifting from these large scale pieces that I've made, and I used to make. Well, and one of the pieces in the show is called a harmonograph, which is a contraption, and so I often made big wooden contraptions that were designed to engage the viewer usually, or have the viewer operate them in some cases. Like in the case of the harmonograph, the viewer manipulates it and it draws for them, so it makes a drawing.
Oh,
it's a little like a spirograph on drugs.
Okay.
It's a crazy contraption with big pendulums on it. It is not. I have to be fair. It's not my design. It's a Victorian parlor game kind of thing that I've recreated my own model of. And so the harmonograph sort of, to me, is almost maybe the end of that kind of big contraption thing. Tom noticed at the beginning of our chat today, I'm sitting in my basement, and my basement has crates and crates of big work. And I'm a little tired of crates of big work sitting in my basement, because I'll make a big piece and I might exhibit it a couple times, and that's on me. I mean, I could be trying to show these more and get them out and sell them, and that's not been a focus of mine at all. So, but I was just getting tired of these big things, and I also have recently really discovered the beauty of wood in a much smaller, sort of more intimate scale. So I'm working now on this kind of jewelry scale, although big jewelry, right? I mean, right now I'm thinking of these as wearable sculptures, and they are big chunk. Like this is just one of this 3-inch block of wood. It's just one of a dozen gemstones that I'm making.
Yeah, and for the sake of the listener, they fit in your hand. I mean, there's one of these gemstones fits in your hand nice and comfortably, so they can get an idea of what the size is.
Exactly, and there'll be a whole bunch of these in a big necklace form. Together. So and to me, what's the tricky part for me is that for a long time, the content of my work was about engaging the viewer, right? Like was really about creating an opportunity of creation for the viewer. And that was the formal focus of everything, right? Everything just kind of revolved around that. And now I'm making these objects that are standalone objects, and that's a whole different ballgame for me. And it's much more traditional sculpture in that sense that, you know, a lot of sculptors often are object makers, and they make these things, whether they're out of steel or wood or plastic or whatever.
And the viewer sits back and sort of takes them in, you know,
Exactly.
and
Exactly.
admires them or thinks they're disgusting or whatever it is. But
Exactly.
basically, that's the relationship between the object and the viewer.
Correct. And I think I'm not quite willing to go to fully freestanding object, because it's already a struggle for me to make a wearable sculpture. I mean, I'm loving it. I'm really enjoying this transition, but conceptually, it's hard for me to sort of give up on this idea of viewer interaction. And so maybe I'm justifying it to myself by making it a wearable that someone could, in fact, engage with individually.
Simply by putting it on.
Exactly. And maybe that's just my way of moving forward. I'm not sure, but it's fun. I'm really enjoying it. And the scale is fun. It also just makes it so that I can, you know, at home, I have teenagers, and so they're so self-sufficient these days. I got time. I got plenty of time to come down to my basement and just get some work done, because they're not asking for much. So it's a fun shift, but it does feel drastic to me, the shift from creating viewer participation kinds of works to more just sculptural works.
So is this more like you know, when you're first doing those big works that were viewer interactive, it's sort of a movement between focusing on the viewer of the artwork to focusing on yourself as the artist in a way, yes?
Maybe I think of it as focusing on the material, right? I mean, to me,
Oh, okay.
That's what I love. I'm staring at this block of wood, which is what I'm enjoying about this. I really, there's so much amazing wood in this area, and you know, and places like Amish mills and small woodworkers, and I can sincerely hear a listener saying, "Well, that's not environmentally sustainable." But all these jewels are made from a bush that died in my front yard, a yew that was really old, and so I harvested the trunk of that, and that's what this is made out of. And the harmonograph was made from a tree that fell down across town.
Now, these pieces that you're making, you say that they're wearable, and one of them is probably like going to be a necklace. Is there any other kind of identifiable wearable that you're working on too? I
have two. I have two sort of necklace forms that I have in the show, and they're both brand. I mean, this is the first time I've ever made that kind of a wearable form in any way, shape, or form, besides a wooden ring. You know, I've made rings as gifts for my family. And so, yeah, right now this is all I've done. Right, literally, this is my second necklace ever. So, yeah, no, I think that's part of the fun of a faculty exhibition. It's not high pressure, right? I mean, I'm not like, it's just not high pressure, and so I can experiment and make new work and play, and
right.
And that's also something I want to encourage my students to do too. So.
Well, I think it's interesting that you're putting out something that you like it's only going to have been in existence for like 2 weeks as opposed to.
Yeah, I'm not done with this one yet, and it's due in the gallery next week. So
yeah, so there you go. You know, but I love that idea. I love that idea of the artwork being fresh and saying to your students and also the people who come to the gallery, you know, I'm in a transition phase. Here's a little bit of what I'm thinking about doing, and this is a little bit of what the direction is, and it's certainly not, you know, a piece of quote unquote art. But it's a process. You're actually showing a process in a sense to people.
For myself, and then that will also give me an opportunity to see the reactions, you know, and get people's reactions to the work. It's all right, man. This feels good. I've been sanding like crazy on this wood, and I haven't even put the finish on yet. It's so beautiful.
It looks beautiful. It looks polished, and it looks like a diadem of some sort. I mean, from
Yeah.
what I can tell, I mean, it's very nice.
Yeah. Yeah, these are really fun, and they were just explorations. I had this, the trunk of this bush that I cut down a few years ago in my yard, and I just started cutting it up on the bandsaw, just sort of seeing what the inside looked like, and then what if I cut it at this angle? What happens when I do this? What happens when I do this? And then I was like, well, wait a minute, that whole thing looks pretty cool. Let's see if I can make more of those.
So let's talk just a little bit about some of the other artists who are going there. I know you don't know everything about what's going in. I actually couldn't find one person who knew about everything that's going into this exhibit. So
there probably isn't one. I mean, except the gallery director probably has a better sense, but they haven't seen, like the stuff that I'm still making. So
exactly, and perhaps that's the fun of the exhibit. That's what's going to be the fun of the exhibit, is everybody coming in and going, oh, there it is,
Right.
But one guy I know whose work who's going in well is Tim Frerich's work.
Right, and I think and Tim, I just had a show at the Birchfield Penny recently, and so I think some of the pieces from the Birchfield will be in this faculty exhibition, and I think Tim's work is really beautiful, and it's really poignant because it's not only about our area, often about Lake Erie. But it also uses materials gathered from the area. So, for example, he might, and I'm going to totally speak out of turn because I don't really know exactly, but I know he uses like ice melt, for example, as water to make some of the papers that he makes for his pieces. So he's gathering not only materials from Lake Erie, like driftwood that he's cutting up to make book covers, but also gathering other materials to use in the production of paper and handmade books that Tim makes, and in his artwork as well, in his 2D sort of work. But it's all thick with meaning, and I think I really love that about Tim's work. It's very thoughtful and very place oriented, and I think all of us can relate to that. I think when you see his work. Well,
Tim is a printmaker, to be clear.
Right, Tim's a printmaker who makes artist books as well, and he's actually really turned me on to artist books, and he brought in an artist from Lithuania recently. We just had for a few weeks at the college through the Erasmus Scholar Exchange Program that Tim and I have both participated in, and this Lithuanian book artist just really turned me on to making artist books. Anyway, I think back to Tim's work. I think his work is always enjoyable, and there's always so much there to learn from. Which I think is really lovely.
And I know also that someone else's work I'm a little bit familiar with. I don't know if he's still going in this direction. Is Jason Dilworth. He's also very interested in sustainability in his work as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, he and our other graphic design faculty, Megan Urban, have created I don't know if you would call it an entity, but they have a project called Designers in Forests, where they're looking at ways to utilize the wood, for example, from all the ash trees that are dying locally from the emerald ash borer beetle. And I know in this faculty exhibition, Jason also, as a graphic designer, is used his skills to create exhibition catalogs for the Marion Art Gallery over the years. And so I think in this exhibition, he's going to be showing a variety of the catalogs he's created, and they're really beautiful. I mean, they are unique works of art.
Yeah, he's very good. I've always liked his work. And I know there's other people who I just want to touch on their names and probably what they do. Some of them I know and some of them I don't know. But I know Phil Hastings will probably have some of his animations up, I'm sure. The two photographers, Stephen Comp and Liz Lee, are going to have their photography exhibit coming up. And as you said, Megan and Jason will be doing what they do. I don't know if you know anything about some of the other artists I see. Kathleen Fenton.
Tom, she is like the loveliest person on the planet, and I'm really excited to see her work in this show. I have no idea what we're going to see. I think I suspect kind of traditional illustrations, but I really don't know. And Abby is a new animation faculty member, and I'm very excited to see Abby's animations. I know she was dealing with shadows, which in an animation, and I think. And she's doing rotoscoping, which is just a process of animation that I really like.
Oh, I like rotoscoping too. Yeah,
so I'm super excited to see what Abby has to show us. And then Alora McCullough is a sabbatical replacement who's here for a year. She's taking Hide Sarahara's place for the year. I haven't seen any of her work except for on her website, and so I'm very excited to see. I know she has some small porcelain works.
Yes, she's ceramics. She's taking
Yeah.
ceramics.
So
there's
that will
also
be fun.
couple of others I'll mention real quickly. Nicholas Borelli, he apparently does playful mutant creatures. I don't know what that means, but we'll find out.
Yeah, and Nick is an alum of our department too. He was here when I started, actually, as a student. So
okay, there we go. And Casey Kelly Perez does. I think she's a graphic designer. Does beer
Correct.
liquor labels for local distilleries, and Sarah Zach, who does large scale paintings with figures, that kind of thing. So there seems to be a wide variety out there. So listen, thanks for your time. I do appreciate you coming down, taking a little half an hour or so to talk to me from the dungeon of your basement there.
My pleasure. I got another piece shined up while we were chatting, so I'm feeling good about that.
Thanks again, Peter. Have a good day and enjoy yourself. Good luck.
Thanks, Tom. Bye-bye.
The faculty exhibit will run from Tuesday, January 24th through Thursday, February 2, 2023. So you don't have a lot of time to get there and view it. An official opening reception will be held on Friday, January 27th, 2023, from 6 to 9 p.m., with the artists present to talk about their work with the general public. Admission is free. Please check the Marion Art Gallery website for more information about specific dates and times. There's no arts calendar for January 12th through 24th, 2023, as there are no arts events outside the Opera House in the region yet up and running. If you do have a coming arts event, however, and would like to get it mentioned on the podcast, send an email to operahouse@fredopera.org or call the box office at 716-679-1891 with your information. The Cinema Series has a full complement of films this January. So, if you're looking for a reason to get out in the coming weeks, you've no excuse not to come to the Opera House and catch a quality film. The Opera House is the ideal place to enjoy these kinds of films. Perhaps not quite as convenient as streaming at home, but the quality of the film experience is much more immersive and so much more satisfying at the theater. And who better to talk about these 3 upcoming films with me than Hollywood's own movie guy himself, Mr. Paul Preston. I'm always glad to know what the movies are coming up at the 1891 Fredonia Opera House, because that means I'll get a chance to be able to talk to one of my favorite guests, Mr. Paul Preston from the Movie Guys. Hello, Paul.
Hello, Tom. And yes, thank God there are movies coming to Fredonia. I mean, back when I went to school there was the Cine 1 and 2. It was over by the CITES, right? Was that the name of the
that's correct. CITES, yes.
Yeah, and then there was the Dunkirk Regent or something like that, which is long gone.
Oh, well, actually, the building is still up, and they were supposed to turn it into something, but the building is there, but it's all boarded up and everything like that.
Then instead of driving to Buffalo, they finally brought that multiplex out by the interstate, but that's gone now too, right?
No, it's not actually. It's still there. It's still there.
Okay.
But they don't put the titles up anymore. They just tell you to go to the website. And that's
okay. So see, that's me driving by it last summer going, well, this is closed. When I was 16, that's part of the job. You tear tickets, we've stocked the popcorn, you go out, you put the letters on the marquee. It's not going to kill you. Oh, boy. Hey, okay. Well, listen, I'm sure the stuff that's coming to the Opera House is not coming to the multiplex, because that's the deal with the art house scene. You get the better stuff, and it's award season, so you got some good stuff coming up.
But I think these movies are really going to be entertaining for some people. So why don't we get down to brass tacks here, and we'll give the audience a little preview on the movies that we've got coming up. The first one is kind of an interesting. It's an interesting little film. It's called The Menu. Give us a rundown on this one, The Menu.
Well, it took me a while to sync up with what this movie was doing, but once you get into its zone, because it definitely creates an atmosphere and a tone that you have to buy into, a premise that you have to buy into, you're in for a scathing takedown of the upper class, which great timing. So, right. right when we got guys, Steve Bezos shooting himself into space. Let's take down the upper class a little bit.
Mhm.
So Ray Fiennes, as you mentioned, plays the highest of the high-end chef who has invited a very specific group of people to a remote island for an exclusive restaurant experience, like $1,500 plates and all that kind of stuff. Big gourmet menu. And he has some surprises in store for them. It's tough to talk about this one without including the finale and the film and the chef's final statement. But along the way, you've got some very entertaining characters. A snooty foodie who talks down to his girlfriend about everything he knows about the food. All these online people who love to chat about food, and a ridiculously rich older couple, a formerly famous actor, that's John Leguizamo, who had a lot of work when he was a kid, not so much anymore, but he's still trying to get into places and do things. That's why he's here, to kind of be in the mix of what's hot and what's hip with this great restaurant. There's some tech bros and of course a food critic, all brought here to be taught a lesson and get an accusatory finger shoved into their face. And when you're watching it, you start going, oh man, yeah, I understand what it's like to be in the food industry and have to deal with these people. It's real tough when they talk down to you and they're demanding and they're outright rude or they're just elitist and all this stuff. And so you start going, this is going to be an interesting sort of, well, what's it like on the other end, when they try and address that. Then quickly, this is not realism. It goes way to the far ends to make its point, and does so because film, theater, all art can do that. It doesn't have to necessarily be a realistic story.
Right.
So it goes super far and to show you how awful people ruin beauty. That's essentially what this movie is about. In this case, it's about food, the preparation of it, the art of it, the delivery, and about all the wrong people get to enjoy the fruits of being well off. I think we can agree on that, right?
Yes, that's true. That's true.
Why that guy? Why is that the rich guy? Can't this person over here? I worked this TV show about 6 years ago, and the set was a mansion in Westwood. And it was a big, sprawling mansion with staircases that came down to this pool, and the pool went out to this guest house, and it was just gorgeous. And I was like, which Kardashian lives here? And they said, no, this is the guy who invented the MRI. And I said, well, I want that guy to have a mansion. That guy, veterans, these are the people who should have mansions.
Right.
Well, you'll quickly see in the menu that these are the wrong people, and they got it coming. So if you want to see them get their comeuppance in a potentially unpleasant way, check out the menu. I had a friend see it recently and call me just yesterday crying when it was over because she's worked in the trenches of the food industry. And she's like, first, I felt like I was going to have this great experience. Like, well, yes, give it to him. Yes, the little guy is going to be. And then by the end, but its message is so much broader and goes so big that she was just a wreck by the time it was over. So you can have anything from an entertaining experience to a highly emotional experience, but either way, you will be affected by the menu.
Let's go to the second film. A spoiler alert, I believe is, yes, the name of it is Spoiler Alert. And this is a romantic comedy drama of a different style.
Comedy, then drama, both going hard in both directions. It's based on a book by TV Guide writer Michael Ausiello about Kit, the man he falls in love with, and the ensuing cancer diagnosis that comes right when their relationship is at its lowest point. So they're doing great. They're doing great. They're not doing so great. And then cancer. And so they're even living in separate places by the time this diagnosis comes. So how do you handle that? This is from director Michael Showalter, who directed The Big Sick. So this is his thing, I guess.
Yeah.
To handle relationship stories and comedy dramas that have to do with an illness, sort of driving a wedge in between them or bringing them together, or at least causing some sort of chaos in the middle of what their lives are trying to lead. I loved this movie. If I were to put a quote on and it'd be tough to even put this quote, but if I ever put a quote on the Blu-ray cover, it would be utterly charming because it strikes the right chord for everything it tries to do in both comedy and drama. And, you can imagine, doesn't shy away from very powerful scenes about someone going through cancer, chemo, the whole business. It could slip into melodrama, but these great performances and a very sharp script kind of save it from going too far that direction. I'll mention the script. David Marshall Grant, who is an actor and has been for years. I remember from a film called American Flyers with Kevin
Wow.
Costner before The Untouchables. So
Wow.
so he's been around, and now I don't know how often he writes, but he did a great job of co-writing the script with Dan Savage, who you may know as the author of the Savage Love Advice column and a fierce advocate for LGBTQ plus rights, and the greatest pundit you could ever have on your show, by the way. Put Dan Savage on your show, whether it's real time or the news or whatever. He's awesome. So
he's very smart, man.
Isn't
very
he?
smart.
Yeah, and
Incredible.
I love listen. And he brought that smart to the script. There's plenty of times in the script when, okay, so they do an interesting thing where, since Osceola is a TV guide writer, he loves TV. He often pictures his life as a sitcom, especially his childhood. So they show scenes from his childhood like a sitcom.
Interesting.
Which I wasn't sure was going to work, because I'm like, well, this seems like a lovely comedy drama, and then we have like a film construct that's going to be different from everything else, but it ends up being interesting because it gets you a lot of information about his character and his family and his past without long monologues that would otherwise drown the movie. When we get to the present, we can do things because the sitcom showed you some information that you needed to know about his mother, about when he was a fat kid, etc. So that shouldn't work. It does. And this is another movie like Bros, which came out recently, which is a straight comedy about a gay couple who, there isn't even a whole lot to Bros outside of they meet, they have trouble, they get back together. But overall, Bros is a hilarious comedy. One of the funniest movies of the year. Couldn't find an audience. Spoiler alert, seems to have trouble finding an audience as well. So it's meant for the theater, I think, because it's got a lot of story that can work on you if you're paying attention. If you get a phone call or whatever, you don't watch the movie at the Opera House. I recommend. That's my problem with streaming in general. And also, look, given that I lost my wife and a fellow Fredonia alum to cancer 3 years ago, this movie risked being way too soon. And yet, it might be just the right time, I think, because I had many of the moments this character has in the movie, when Michael has to fight for his loved one to get a bed for his chemo because he has rectal cancer. He can't sit for 4 hours, and they go, well, we don't have any beds. And he just, well, listen, he needs that. And they walk away. He goes, finds him, tracks him down, says, look, I need you to get a bed. And I've had that very same experience when it's like, hey, we're meeting a new oncologist. I need the records to take to this new oncologist. Well, we can have them in 3 to 4 business days. We're meeting tomorrow. I need these now. Well, we can't do it. And I start yelling. So I've totally felt, if anyone has been in a situation, they played this out very real and very emotional. And of course, what happened? The lady goes in the back, prints out the records, brings them to me. I'm like, well, why didn't you just do that in the first place?
Exactly, right.
They say 3 to 4 days, probably because then they don't get in trouble if they don't, but this is stuff I needed right away. And the frustration, the love, the two characters, when they fall in love, that's all real and palpable. And then when there's frustration and pain and heartache, that's all real and palpable as well. I thought this film was really good. And plus you got Sally Field and Bill Irwin playing.
I was going to ask you about those two, because I mean, Sally Field and Bill Irwin, talk about two wonderful actors ready to be, the kinds of parents that I imagine this film needs. They're terrific.
Yeah, they're the parents of Kit, the young man who has cancer. They are, it's a steal getting them. It feels like a bargain to get these two guys. I mean, Sally Field's fantastic. Bill Irwin is amazing. These are two great actors. Yeah, just coming into their sideline parts, killing it. And, you don't have to worry about them. So to me, this just hits all across the board. It's very accessible, very fun, very tear-jerking, without, it's not trying to be anything more than it is. It's not failing at trying to be what it is either. It hits the bullseye. I enjoyed this movie very, very much.
Okay, so that's the spoiler. That's the second of the January movies coming at the Opera House. And the last one is entitled Empire of Light. And this is a British film, as far as I can tell. It's sort of Like it seems to be a film that's set with the working class, but some interesting things take place in it.
A lot of things. Kind
Hmm.
of don't know what it's trying to focus on 1 minute to the next. It throws a lot into the mix and handles it all because Sam Mendes is a skilled director. He directed Skyfall and Spectre, two big Bond movies. But let's not forget, he also directed American Beauty
Hmm.
and directed 1917 and Road to Perdition. He's a very, very skilled director, as you probably know, started in the theater. So look at him.
Yes.
He returns to a prestige project here, but perhaps so simple, even though there's a lot in there. Like I said, there's a lot going on, yet it's simple. Somehow he does that,
Hmm.
that it could be overlooked. I suggest checking it out to make up your own mind. But here's the number one reason you guys see it: Olivia Colman.
Oh, yes.
Olivia Colman, and you should see everything she's in and everything
Hmm.
she does. She plays a woman working in the 1980s cinema in Great Britain who forms a relationship with a new employee, but she's struggling with mental health. So there's one
Hmm.
thing that's going on. Plus, the new employee is black. So they're contending with all the racism in England in the 1980s. So there's that. Plus,
Hmm.
there's all the love of movies. So there's that. There's a lot going on. But along the way, you're joined by some of the greats of all time. You have uh, Roger Deakins is your cinematographer here. Roger shot Skyfall, and he won the Oscar for Blade Runner 2049. He shot No Country for Old Men. I mean, it's one of the best cinematographers of all time. So this movie looks beautiful. Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross have done the score. Trent Reznor, you may know from Nine Inch
Nine Inch
Nails.
Nails. Yes, I know.
Well, is that his first? He won the Oscar for The Social Network, I believe.
Uh-huh.
And he scored The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo. He's worked a couple times with David Fincher. This is a gorgeous, lush piano score. It's crazy. And he does a fantastic job with it. So those two guiding you along with Sam Mendes' direction. It may not achieve everything the movie tries to do in terms of showing you its love of cinema, but it's a very sincere film. It is British, of course, as you said. It's very British. The filmmaker here, Sam Mendes, writing the script for the first time. He usually directs other people's scripts. He's demanding period accuracy, and he's wanting to summon the ghosts of the past for this story. And you kind of get swept up in it, even though there's sometimes so much in the mix, you're not sure what to get most passionate about.
Hmm.
I think throughout, though, it's always Olivia Colman. You always come back to her. She's magnificent and centers the whole film. And you get Toby Jones in there too, who's a good actor. Every once in a while coming along. He's the projectionist, so he's the guy who really starts talking about cinema and what everything cinema can do. And eventually, cinema and Olivia Colman kind of come together at the end for an emotional moment for the viewer as well. But it's a lovely film, and it's may not achieve everything it wants to do, but you get in there and see what you like, and those moments that you like, I think you'll really enjoy. Yeah.
So I have to get before we go. I do have to just get one thing out of you because I don't know if I'm going to be able to get you back. I hope. I will get you back at some point in time. But if I don't get you back by Oscar time, I,
Ah.
I'm going to ask you. I'll put you on the spot now and ask you which movie should win the Oscar for Best Picture and which movie will win the Oscar for
Ooh.
Best Picture.
Ay.
Might be a little too early for this for you, huh?
Yeah. Tom, you may not want to hear it, but this Top Gun Maverick is amazing. It's a phenomenal movie that is the most enjoyable, exciting film you'll see all year. And you can't say bad things about it for achieving that.
Uh-huh.
You obviously want to look at prestige films about important topics and think that those are the best film. But Top Gun Maverick is phenomenal. In the world of like prestige picks, smaller movies about human drama, The Banshees of Inisherin is fantastic, with Colin Farrell delivering one of his best performances. Brendan Gleeson, brilliant as always, and this Martin McDonagh guy hasn't made a bad movie yet.
Mhm.
He's a great playwright. Like Sam Mendes, slips into cinema and suddenly is an amazing director. Like, I don't know how he does it, and this is another one. It's like a enemy's origin story about a guy who just says one day, you know what, I can't be your friend anymore because I got things I want to do. I'm in my 60s. I need to write music and have a legacy. And how do they each handle this situation? So those are probably two of my favorites, along with Everything, Everywhere, All at Once. Is the wackiest movie of the year that hits so many points it sets out to hit that it should not. The juggling of everything those guys throw into the mix, the directors, the Daniel Kwan and Daniel Scheinert, I believe, to stick the landing on a movie that shoots that high is a miracle. And of course, we got Short Round, like who there's your Oscar lock. I think Ki-hai Kwan wins Best Supporting Actor for that film. Best Picture still up in the air. Tom, I wish I could tell you a will win. Tar is phenomenal. Kate Blanchett's performance in that is ridiculous. I mean, again, while you're walking the earth with her and not watching her, why are you walking the earth and not watching her stuff? So, Tom, you will love that movie, Tar. So let's see if maybe that comes to the Opera House somewhere down the line.
Okay.
But so those are the four, I think, that are in the mix.
All right. Well, Paul, thank you very much. I do appreciate it, as always, having you around. And if we do get a little bit closer to Oscar time and they haven't done it, maybe I'll find a way to squeeze in a little Oscar rant. Who knows? I mean, get you a different platform. Paul Preston from The Movie Guys, thanks a lot for coming on.
Thanks, Tom.
The cinema series always plays on Saturdays and the following Tuesdays, with both days having a 7:30 p.m. start time. The Menu plays on Saturday, January 14th and 17th. Spoiler alert screens on January 21st and 24th. And Empire of Light will be shown on January 28th and 31st. Tickets are $7 for adults, $6.50 for Opera House members, and $5 for students. Tickets are available at the door only on the night of the show. And that's it for this winter break edition of Notes from the Aisle Seat. My thanks to Dr. Robert Strauss, Mr. Peter Tucker, and the movie guy, Paul Preston, for being my guests on this episode. Notes from the Aisle Seat is a production of the 1891 Fredonia Opera House in Fredonia, New York. For more information on any of the Opera House's events, call the box office at 716-679-1891. Visit the website at www.fredopera.org or email at operahouse@fredopera.org. Notes from the Aisle Seat is now available wherever you get your podcasts, including Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, Amazon Music, and also on the Opera House YouTube channel. If you like this podcast, please consider following us by clicking the follow button on our website at aisleseat.podbean.com and spreading the word through your social media feeds. If you have an arts event you'd like featured on the podcast, why don't you drop us a line at operahouse@fredopera.org, and we'll see about featuring your event. Please try to give us a month's advance notice if possible to facilitate timely scheduling. If you have any suggestions, comments, or criticisms of the podcast, just drop us a line at operahouse@fredopera.org. We'll be glad to receive your feedback. Our next episode will be available on January 25th, 2023. I'm Tom Laughlin, and until then, be safe out there and be kind to one another.